say you wanna watch a drama. You say you wanna watch a comedy. Well, you can watch it with your mama, or you can watch it with your daddy.
You'll even sit and watch it with your middle schooler, so you can come and talk around a water cooler. We're watching all day and all night.
Couch potatoes unite.
Whoa, whoa.
Couch potatoes unite.
Whoa, whoa. Couch potatoes unite.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! Which is based on a blog of the same name, kind of like different facets of our core personality, if you will. Or maybe our different formats are different personalities altogether. Hello, friend. But they all already have a name, and thus we slide down that slippery slope. You're following us, right? My name is Kylie, and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, as you're bound to find some common ground or something you like. For Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and the unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU! Hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays, and as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panelists and I live lives behind our podcast, the episodes are published once per week. Subscribe to the blog or the podcast via iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, via Google Play, and now on Spotify to stay on top of brand new episodes. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows around the water cooler, including, but not limited to, Fuller House, Westworld, Arrested Development, Jane the Virgin, Schitt's Creek, Doctor Who, Supernatural, Orange is the New Black, Riverdale, and Gotham. We've published several episodes in our Looking Back series covering such diverse shows as Freaks and Geeks, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, The Americans, Reign, and Friends. Plus new episodes are in the works, including revisits for Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., 13 Reasons Why, Altered Carbon. We'll be launching new panels covering Charmed, Outlander, The Breaking Bad Universe, and This Is Us. And because we look back at shows now past, we'll put out some musical stops for our crazy ex-girlfriend. We'll revisit one of the all-time and most-watched classic sitcoms, MASH, and we'll consider the moral implications and quick cancellation of Dollhouse. By the way, did you know that CPU also from time to time goes live? We've been live from bunkers, comedy shows, and Comic-Cons. Plus, we're planning more live appearances and other cool stuff, so make sure you like or follow us at our Facebook page, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or subscribe to the blog, our YouTube channel, our Apple iTunes channel, our Stitcher Radio channel, or find us on Google Play and on Spotify. In the meantime, if you don't hear your show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews, and we always seek new panelists, so if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any of those outlets I've mentioned. At the very least, stop by and leave us a thumbs up, comment, review. We like feedback. Direct feedback is good, though. Don't send your Dark Army fixers to do your dirty work. We can all agree to disagree. Today we're around the water cooler and continuing our retrospective series in which we look back at the final 2 seasons of a 4-season techno-psychological thriller that aired on the USA Network and that just ended its run this past December. Hey, better late than never. In addition, if you aren't already aware, from time to time, CP will be choosing shows of all types, but usually of some fame or notoriety to reminisce about, and to consider whether or not they age gracefully like Elliot when he's working well with MrRobot, or don't hold up as well like Elliot when he tries to ignore the existence of MrRobot. As such, this is another chapter of our Looking Back podcast episodes, wherein we review a show that has been gone, either via natural end or cancellation for a time, and today, the show is MrRobot. This is the second of a 2-part retrospective miniseries in which CPU looks back at this acclaimed show. In the second part, we're discussing Season 3, which aired from October 11th, 2017 to December 13th, 2017, with a total of 10 episodes. To remind the listener, MrRobot is an American drama thriller television series created by Sam Esmail for USA Network. It stars Rami Malek as Elliot Alderson. When the series starts, Elliot works at a cybersecurity company named AllSafe as a cybersecurity engineer. Constantly struggling with social anxiety, dissociative identity disorder, and clinical depression, Elliot's thought process seems heavily influenced by paranoia and delusion. He connects to people by hacking them, which often leads him to act as a cyber vigilante. He's recruited by a mysterious insurrectionary anarchist known as MrRobot, played by Christian Slater, and joins his team of hacktivists known as F Society. One of their missions is to cancel all consumer debt by destroying the data of one of the largest corporations in the world, E-Corp, which Elliot perceives as Evil Corporation, or Evil Corp, and which also happens to be Allsafe's biggest client. MrRobot was a show requested by a few like-minded masterminds and some of our resident couch potatoes, to wit, panelists Jeremy, Amy, Julianne, Aaron, and Dave, the latter two of the Mr. Rewatch podcast, which lived with this show until its conclusion, reconvened around the water cooler ready to tell you that this is what democracy looks like and to tackle the second half of this complex, richly woven thriller. As always, it should be noted that all of our panelists have watched all episodes now, it's true, of this series to date, and will discuss very sensitive plot points. So for those of you who have not watched any of MrRobot and plan to do so at some point in your life, listen at your own risk, as there may be major spoilers. Welcome back, panel. How are you?
Good. Hey.
Are you ready to talk about the series conclusion of MrRobot?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm so excited that you've all seen all the episodes.
Finally, right?
Me too.
Yes.
The expressions in the room will be so much different, and I'm very excited to see it. Well, before we get too far into that discussion, what I have to do first is to take your temperature as a panel along the standard CPU character question, which changes with each show we do, and that's because your opinion may have changed from seasons 1 and 2 to seasons 3 and 4, not to mention the fact that I have tweaked the character question because there are more characters, and then there were not as many characters that went away, and then some of the characters changed their place in the show. So I'm going to ask you how you feel nowadays. Are you ready? Yes. Now that we've watched the whole series?
Yes.
All right. So, how do you feel about MrRobot having finished all 4 seasons collectively as a panel? Okay. Did you think the show is utter genius? You watched all of it hungrily. Otherwise, you would never be satisfied until you broke down all of its components and learned all of its secrets. You think MrRobot could rule the world if people only gave it the chance you did, like Fernando Vera. You adored the show because of how well plotted it all is, even if it had a slip-up here or there. You were intrigued by the match of masterminds, that's in quotes, at the fore of the story, and the divide only by philosophy, if not by tactics, and are willing to forgive any alleged sins and to defend it until your dying breath, like Minister Ji Zhang, aka White Rose. This show is a part of you in ways that you cannot quantify, qualify, or explain. You love it in the way you love a family member, real or not real. Sometimes the story can be frustrating, especially as you don't always know what is real. Sometimes watching the show helps you to see parts of yourself you never realized were there, like Elliot Alderson. You still like this show quite a bit, though you adored it at first, particularly for the main character, the motif, the topsy-turvy storytelling. At the same time, it wasn't quite what you expected it to be, and that falling short of expectations left you feeling a sense of anticlimax about the whole thing, a sense of disappointment, but also a resolute resignation to the idea that you would finish the journey no matter what it cost, like Tyrell Wellick. Did you love the Elliot character as well as the strong female characters represented in this cast, but you can't help feeling confused and or off-put by some of the character decisions that are made at times. They leave you feeling uneasy or unsettled, like Angela Moss. Did you love the Elliot character and the general spirit behind the show and the society-disrupting hack at the story's center, but you do find yourself irritated by the fact that the show is told from Elliot's point of view most of the time, which influenced you to stop watching for a period and or to try to relate to other characters instead, like Darlene Alderson? Did you find the show sobering? You thought you had it figured out and were innately impatient with the Elliot character for a while, but with each new twist and revelation, you decided the whole viewing experience surprised even you at times and was a worthwhile act of love, like Edward Alderson, aka MrRobot. Did you think the show was so random you really watched it because that was what was expected of you, and for the occasional fun moment, like killing someone with an axe, not because you had much of a stake in any of it in the end, though you'd probably read the novelization of it if one was ever published, like Irving, the Dark Army Fixer? Were you curious enough about the show to investigate it by watching it, but found that it was far darker than you were bargaining for, and you didn't know how to feel about it in the end, other than completely wearied from the emotional ups and downs? In fact, you feel that watching the show was more detrimental than desirable, like Agent Dominique DiPiero. You have no specific interest in the show. You view it as a means by which to acquire and to consolidate power. In fact, fact, it's the villain, the corporation in this story that intrigues you most, and how nothing really is as it seems or is as black and white as the show's red herring leads you to believe, like Philip Price. You don't care for the show much? You just showed up to get the job done and to ensure that others did the same, no matter how violently, like Janice, the Dark Army fixer. Or you abruptly stopped watching because you felt you simply had to give up and start something new, or, spoiler, you died, like Joanna Wellick, who would like to start. Sometimes this happens.
I'm Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hi.
Hi.
I think this time around I am still White Rose because
Yes, because you tried to insert that the last time.
This time you
when it
can
was
really
not
be White Rose.
on the thing, but that's fine. Everything is fine.
it was my psychic powers hard at work. I'm like White Rose because I feel like a lot of times in the show I felt like I knew better than everyone else, and if they would just follow my direction and listen to what I was saying, everything would have turned out a lot better than it did. There was a few moments where I thought, like her, I was going to throw something at the wall and rage out because people weren't listening to what I wanted them to do. Yeah, but so I'm White Rose.
Nice start to the conversation. Welcome back, Jeremy.
Hello, I'm Julianne.
Hi, Julianne.
I would say definitely Elliot. The show is part of me in ways I can't quantify, qualify, or explain. Sometimes it can be frustrating. You don't always know it's real. I often find myself trying to watch this from Elliot's perspective, or who we believe Elliot to be, and I'm just kind of along for the ride, and I feel as confused as he does, and I find myself just watching it and just waiting to see what happens next, just constantly waiting to see.
Do you remember who you were last time?
I think I was Tyrell.
You were.
Yep, I think I was.
So, does that mean you slipped a little bit? Because he was in the adoration column.
Yeah, and I think Tyrell's character changes a little bit. He has
Does.
some realizations, so yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yes, that's it.
Okay. Welcome back, Julianne.
Thanks.
It's Amy.
Hi, Amy.
Hello. So, I think I only answered Elliot last time. I'm pretty sure. Did I mix it up? I was trying to mix it up a little bit. I can't remember.
I don't remember if you had multiples. I do remember Elliot.
So I'm still a little bit Elliot for all the same reasons that Julianne mentioned, but I'm definitely Vera. I love the show. I think it's just wonderful. I was one of the people asking to do it, and I'm glad that we are, and I think everything...
She means on the podcast.
On the podcast. I'm sorry.
Did you write Sam Aspinall?
I did, BFFs. So I think this show is genius, and I've said it throughout, that I think it's genius, and I was hoping that the last season would be just as genius as I was hoping, and I think it was, but we'll talk about that later. So a little bit of Elliot, for sure, still that, but definitely Fernando Vera.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Amy.
Thank you.
So mine has changed this time, I think.
Okay. What's your name?
So I'm gonna. What's that?
What's your name?
Hi, I'm Erin.
Hi, Erin.
Hello.
I think that my character has changed this episode, actually. So this time I would choose Philip Price. I think that villainy is done really well in this show. And in these two seasons in particular, I'm interested in how thin the line between good and evil is. I also really like seeing women characters doing evil stuff. I just find that kind of fascinating. So a good 2 seasons for me to pick Price, I think.
Nice.
Welcome back, Erin.
Hey, I'm Dave.
Hi, Dave.
For a rewatch. Yeah, I don't remember who I picked last time. I know this is a middle-of-the-road show for me. It's kind of in the middle of the pack of all my favorite TV shows. I'm enamored with the Irving character, so I'm going to pick Irving.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily agree with... I don't find the show confusing, but I do, I kind of watch it as a... What's the word I'm looking for here? Kind of more, technical, not so much driven by the plot, but more like, oh, that was a great episode.
Okay. I think last time you were MrRobot, and I
Yeah,
feel...
that sounds right.
Yeah, and I feel like Erin was actually Tyrell as well. Hesitant to say so. There were a couple that were. I guess
I was.
Yeah. I guess I'll be Tyrell because...
You said you were sheep. Easily led viewer.
I'm easily led along by the storyline.
Well, welcome back to everybody. Of course, my name is Kylie. I'm moderating as well as participating. I think last time I was Elliot. I would be White Rose and Elliot this time. I'm going to pick 2 because there are a couple of bones that I have to pick with the overall show in terms of the character progression. I think Elliot's story was particularly well-rounded, beginning, middle, end. brilliantly executed. We'll talk about that. Ancillary characters, not all of them were well-rounded, and I feel like some of them ended up being devices, which felt a little bit like a cheat. But I'm willing to defend it till my dying breath, though I will not self-inflict, spoiler, with a gunshot to prove my point. So, welcome back to everybody. We're going to talk about seasons 3 and 4. We're going to kind of do what we did in our last episode, which was hit on each season individually. And then we have some wrap-up questions, which are typical of our looking back episodes. Just kind of an overall, where do you think, is this TV show recommendable, that sort of thing. So let's start with season 3. Season 3, the whole action ramps up. It's all about this phase 2 business and whether or not it goes forward. And in the meantime, Elliot is becoming much more conscious of his relationship with MrRobot, as are the others in his life, admitting that they're conscious of it too. And there are some things that happen where some people die. We'll get to that. Or lead up to deaths that happen immediately in season 4. So let's start with the general and we'll work our way down. What did you think of season 3? What did you like? What didn't you like?
I liked a lot of the side characters, honestly, in season 3, especially the cubicle mate that was in episode 1 of season 3. Like, I found that kind of disturbing,
because
but hilarious
that's when
at the same
Elliot
time.
was working at E-Corp. Is that what
Yes.
you're talking about? Okay.
Like some of the, even just the little cute, now I don't want to say cute turns of phrase, but because they were definitely not cute. I was actually cracking up watching it, and I thought I would wake some people up that were sleeping.
Okay.
But other side characters too, like, I don't know, there's a lot of them. I lost my place.
That happens.
So last time we talked about season 2, we were kind of talking about pace and how it felt a little bit slow. And season 3 explodes, I feel.
Yes.
It's just, it kind of right out the gate has that energy to it. And I liked following some of the other ancillary characters, particularly the episode with Trenton and Mobley, which was really sad. And how that whole storyline played out was really sad, but
What happened with Trenton and Mobley?
they got dark armied.
It became a verb. You heard it here first.
when it's that bad, it becomes a verb. Yeah.
I
Oh
was
my
angry
gosh.
at that episode too.
Yes, yeah, but I thought it sort of escalated it to another level, and some of the character introductions, like Irving, I mean, he's just
Played by
so,
Bobby Cannavale.
He's
Oh,
so
so
wonderful.
awesome.
Irving was such
Irving
a great
and Janice.
character. I mean,
That's
in these
season
last
4.
2 seasons, yeah, no, but in these last 2 seasons, those both villains and non-villains, or villains quote, I guess, the introduction of new characters was really, really amazing. I enjoyed season 3 because we got to see another side of Elliot and the story, and seeing him sobered up and focused and driven in a new way, where he was driven before, but also not, there was a lot of confusion as a narrator, if you will, with what was going on. I feel like there was more stability in season 3 that set us up. We're not talking about it yet, but set us up for the finale. And I love the introduction of these characters and the development and seeing what happened to other characters, even if it was tragic. But it was still good to, to know that there were other people who were really integral to the whole story, and what happened to them and how they were weaved in. It was a really solid season for me.
One of my favorite side characters, strangely, in this season is Santiago.
Yeah.
Who, actually, I'll give Dave credit. Dave called the plot twist around Santiago, and I dismissed him.
Don't just
And that's on record.
And then he's like, I told you so.
But he just seems like such a, and I should have known, because he seems like such a flat, he's just a jerk. He's just a bad boss. So I should have just seen it coming, that there would be this kind of rich backstory to him. So I really appreciate, like the rest of you, I think, those sort of ancillary characters and getting their stories fleshed out a little bit.
Things I liked about season 3 was I felt like there was more direction, like we were kind of closer to a conclusion as to what this whole story was about. Something I did not like was how dirty Trenton and Mobley got. And like, there's an issue that we've talked about on our show, how like these secondary characters, people of color, very important to the plot, are just kind of like done away with to advance the plot.
Right, like Romero or like Trent.
Yeah, Romero, Trent Mobley, like it. We kind of felt that was a little dirty, but it did advance the plot in a way, so it did its job, I guess. I absolutely love Irving. I think Irving is one of the greatest written characters of all time, and I'm going to talk about him a lot today.
Okay, fair enough. What do you think about the point that they just raised? That is kind of true. A lot of, with the exception of Angela, which we'll talk about very shortly here, because that's more season 4, a lot of the deaths we see are the cast of color.
That brings up a good point. I mean, we have people who are not people of color who die as well, but maybe not in the same frequency maybe of people of color. This may be ignorant just because the creator is a Middle Eastern man, but I think those characters, it's possible that no matter what race those characters would be done with, but they happen to be people of color. However, the fact that is even brought up means that there's an inequity there, and it just doesn't look right. It's not something I thought of, and it's usually something I think about, but because I thought the show had such good balance between people of color and just diversity, it didn't seem imbalanced to me. But I mean, I can absolutely see it. It didn't deter me this time around. And those who know me in the room know that this is something I both advocate for and work with in the industry that I've worked in. I think in this instance, it might have just been the story and who they decided to put in that story. Like, it may be that Romero wasn't even supposed to be, like, a black man or what have you. And it could have been any other character. I don't know. But that's the way that I choose to kind of deal with that.
I think that makes sense, because that is kind of the way Sam Esmail would look at casting, is just like, who's the best person that fits this role.
Well, and I think it's important to note, too, so the most impactful deaths that we see along the way are the characters that we have been following from almost moment one, and that includes the group that is F Society. So essentially Elliot, Darlene, Trenton, Mobley, Romero, and then MrRobot, who we realize later is, Elliot, but a different personality. And if you think about it, aside from MrRobot, because obviously he's not real per se, he's real, but he's not really there in a way that he's Christian Slater real. All of the people on F Society have some kind of, I think, disenfranchised status because Mom is Middle Eastern or Indian or something like that, and Trenton is Muslim and possibly Indian, and then Mobley is Jewish. I'm wondering if it's just because they're the ones that stand up and then become the targets, as it were. And I think it's actually meaningful that there might have been an underlying thought that the people who orchestrated this large hack and disrupted society are the ones that might have felt the most disenfranchised by it.
You bring up a really good point about that, and I think for two reasons that I just thought of. One, if you look at the group of F Society as you described them, and then look at the E Corp and the people they're trying to defeat, with the exception of Dark Army, that is separate. But looking at E Corp, they're all your standard, well-to-do white men, very, very greedy or whatever, kind of like the stereotypical
Fortune 500 boardroom.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you for saying that. But then what you described in terms of, or what I perceive in terms of like the intention there, underlying intention there, I think Sam Esmail may have. I wouldn't be surprised if he took that into consideration too. Because he's been working on the show for a really long time, and it's very detailed and it's very thought out, maybe with the exception of a few character storylines that we'll talk about later. It wouldn't surprise me if he made that conscious effort that F Society would be this group of people who rise up and take control of what they feel they can take control of.
Well, it'd be fascinating to ask him.
When you look at it as a group of F Society, you can see that there's almost somebody representing every minority in the group almost. So it would be rising up against the quote-unquote white man in power kind of thing.
Just, it becomes like a shame when the way that it was staged with Trenton and Mobley and their, like, how it was publicized, like, I don't know, it felt like, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Are you talking about the terrorist aspect
yes,
of it? Like the hate fear-mongering?
The fear-mongering, yep.
Stereotyping.
It felt like stereotyping and fear-mongering based on that when, people didn't know the full truth. Like, the people didn't know the full truth about what that fight was.
But in actuality, the terrorists were the Asian people.
Right. Yeah.
And I think, too, they do a nice job in, I want to say it's 3.7 maybe, when, you see Trenton's family preparing to
move away. And so, kind of looking at the impact of that Islamophobia and how that story was portrayed in media. And so in that way, I see that they've kind of taken what could be a painful plot point and made it sort of useful in terms of, I very much believe that's how people around them could react, right? So, I think it's heavy stuff, but it's interesting to see the way they kind of process the outcome for, the people who are left behind after their deaths.
Yeah, I completely agree. That was the thought I was just having. I think they handled it responsibly, but without getting too far down this rabbit hole, that is kind of society now and how society would react. And I think the show was advancing that sometimes it's done in a purposeful way, and it didn't shy away. So Aaron, in the last episode, you mentioned how MrRobot was kind of reflective of the changing of society, particularly American society, and what we see is the turnover in presidency on the show. It starts with Obama, it ends with Trump, and his image is either deeply in the background, like it was graffitied on a wall at one point, to, you see, in the season 4, when they're convening as the 1%, which we'll talk about, the back of who you presume is Donald Trump. So I don't think the show was shying away from reality to ground us in this world. So I agree with Amy. My work is in anti-discrimination, anti-harassment when I'm not doing a TV podcast. And I would be the first to react like, oh, that was not good. And I didn't have that instant reaction myself watching this. And I think it's because of how the story set the characters up. Although Trenton and Mobley, that was very hard to watch, but also brilliantly acted by the brilliantly performed by those two. And I think that it just ratcheted up how, by the realness of it, how scary and intense the situation was. Which to me, these last 2 seasons, so that's where I'll kind of jump in on a general observation, are deeply, deeply intense. Like the first 2 seasons, sure, there's disturbingness, there's intensity on like a low level, you're anxious, you're like, what's going on here? I don't understand. What's real? What's not real? He's using drugs. What does this mean? Are we obfuscating the reality? But in seasons 3 and 4, the cards are on the table except for the few aces in the hole that they're holding back, and it's very, very intense. And so I just think these moments punctuate just for the, it turns up the volume, I guess. Here's a segue. I'm actually having a mental image of the opening of Back to the Future when Marty McFly is plugging the guitar into Doc's big speaker system, and he turns it all the way up and it gets blown back against the wall. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
That's an appropriate thing to say on this podcast.
It is.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to talk about that in the season 4. What else did you like or didn't you like about season 3?
Season 3 includes the conclusion of Joanna Wellick's story.
Yes, it does.
So
Pretty
this
quickly.
this coming back to maybe our previous discussion, but one of the things we talked about is this the woman in the refrigerator trope? And so that had to be explained to me. But
Explain it to me.
Yeah.
Oh, let me explain it to you because it made it all make sense. So this is where women characters get killed off in order to further the storyline of a man character. And I kind of thought, because I was so interested in Joanna, and this could be my bias, because I think that evil queen story is kind of fascinating to me, that really to sever that tie, because that's ammunition they're going to use with Tyrell later in the show, she just kind of gets killed off out of nowhere to me. It was sort of surprising. And I think some of the coverage I read, it was sort of a surprise to the actor as well. So I just thought the ending to that didn't feel satisfying to me. And I would have liked, I don't know, even I expected actually that she would be killed off at some point, but I would have liked it a little bit differently somehow. So that's one of my least favorite parts.
It felt like it was a lot of storytelling for a mechanic that they could have done in a very different way. I mean, you got almost so invested in the Joanna character for that little bit of a mechanic of putting pressure on Tyrell later, which felt to me a little out of left field. And even with the driver, her bodyguard, I was like, what? That seems like a little much for a character that you're just killing off just for this reason, it seemed like.
I agree. She seems so interesting, and like there's so much more there to have it just end the way that it did.
I agree.
I agree with that too.
You know,
I'm right with you, Aaron. I I didn't know it was called Woman in the Refrigerator or whatever you just
Yeah.
said.
We just learned something new.
There's a phrase for this?
There is.
We'll be able to explain why that makes sense. But, yeah.
Yeah, okay. But I totally agree. I mean, Joanna is not one of my favorite characters. But when that happened, my immediate reaction was, why the heck did we spend all this time with her and with the young baby and with her affair with the bartender and the bodyguard? Why did we spend all that episode real estate on her if she was just going to be ignominiously shot in the car and done? That just felt really disingenuous. And it really did feel like it was a propulsion forward, and a minor propulsion, really. They could have put pressure on Tyrell in a lot of different ways. Why she had to be... And they didn't even... Irving did not even verify to Tyrell that Joanna was dead until after he had pulled off the part of the hack that he was in charge of. And then he got handed that note. So it was like... They were pretending they were alive anyway, and then it was just dropped on him like, oh, by the way, she's dead.
It would have been...
In his interrogation, right?
Wasn't Santiago who told him?
Oh, yeah, it was
Yeah.
Santiago. What was in the note?
But I don't remember. But Irving didn't actually tell him, but he just said... He
I'm
just ignored
sorry.
that, yeah.
He said, I'm
It would
sorry.
have been
Yeah.
more interesting if Irving was the one that killed her.
I'm getting confused on the details.
I
watched
know,
this
it's
very
so
fast.
easy to get so easy to get confused.
There's so many details.
There's a
There
lot
are.
of details.
Yeah. A lot of people killing a lot of other people.
That's why you take notes, people.
Well, here's what bothered me about her
Did
storyline.
you not get the email? Okay, sorry.
Was,
Amy.
no, don't apologize. But it's speaking of using so much episode real estate, like, I started to not care about her after a while because of this bartender guy. Like, it was so much that I just was not interested in. I wanted to get back to any other character, to be honest.
It's like you're taking screen time away from important people.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Tell me
why.
more.
Yeah, that's why I felt she wasn't really my favorite, because
Yeah.
it seemed like her progression ended pretty abruptly with her showdown with Scott, and then the fact that we even continued with her at all into this season, and then where it ended. I mean, I thought they were think they were building towards something different than just what it
almost makes
was.
me wonder if they were doing focus groups after every episode and it wasn't written this way originally, and people were like, oh, I really don't like this character. Oh, let's try to find a way to kill her off.
Or Sam could have tried to get us off the scent because she was getting all those gifts, and she was thinking they were from Tyrell, and we find out they're not. But it's possible that it was just a device to throw us off a bit, which is not a satisfactory reason for
Communism was a red herring.
Yeah, and most of that throwing off was in season 2. The episodes.
I know.
In
I'm
season
just trying
3.
to justify it.
Oh. You're a white rose. You're a white rose.
I am. Maybe I am.
Because that was
I
one
think,
of. Go
I
ahead.
think killing Joanna is supposed to demonstrate how random real life actually is. Because it wasn't Dark Army that killed her, right? It was like this affair she had with a guy she was trying to get, like she was manipulating, right? So it was kind of like her own fault almost, because she put him in that position. And it's just to demonstrate that, like, oh, not everything in this world is happening because other people are, like, making it happen. It was completely random and by accident.
That's a
I
good
kinda
point,
took
but
it
it
a
doesn't
little
make
bit
good
differently,
TV.
I have to say, because to me, I thought, and I'm sorry to be so dark today. I feel like
It's fine.
We're talking about Mr. Robot.
I
We
need to
can't help
lighten up,
it.
But for me, I thought, well, this is actually a very common domestic violence storyline that happens every day in both of our countries, and it can happen to anyone, no matter how wealthy or powerful you are. So is it just showing women are vulnerable in all situations? And isn't that bleak? Sorry, that was so bleak.
Drop
But
the
I
mic. Drop the mic.
It's a cautionary tale.
Don't drop the mic. Jeremy, what were you saying?
I don't remember.
You forgot. Okay. That's fine. I'll agree with your observation, Dave. I think that's an interesting take on it. But I gotta tell you, by that point in the story, I didn't care about that. So it's like if they were gonna do that, I felt like it should have happened really literally any other point than it did, because at that point in the story there was so much going on with the phase 2 and the Angela sort of manipulating Elliot along the way and coaxing out MrRobot, and Darlene just trying to get Elliot to commit to any of it while being scared by MrRobot, that Joanna, to piggyback off of Amy, did feel like an aside for a long time. And so even if it was just life is random, at that point it was like, well, Okay.
Well, especially when, other characters feel so intentional.
Yes.
And everything feels like, for the most part, there are payoffs or something happened in an intentional way. That was one where it was like, I feel like maybe it was going somewhere, but somewhere along the lines in production, something changed. Like writing or something. There was some sort of feedback that was given that, like, maybe this is a character that's got to go.
Well, and I feel like if Terrell maybe would have done a better job of putting forth that his motivation for doing all this was for his family, because in seasons 1 and 2, he was super family oriented. Like, everything was for his wife and his family. And in the later seasons, it feels like it was more for his mark on society and that kind of thing instead of Joanna. So she's kind of just forgotten about it, seems like.
Well, and his flashback episode came after her death, because he was still meditating on family in the flashback episode. So maybe that's what I'm reacting to. Like, maybe if, I don't know. I don't have a good answer, and of course this is hindsight, so I'm not going to backseat write the show, but just at the time it felt very, I questioned why I spent so much time caring at all, basically, and I don't think that's a great place to leave a character. Even if it is for a really random reason, usually there's... The rule of film and TV is if you see it on screen, they have to have a purpose. And I would agree that she had, for the first full 2 seasons, she had 3 dimensions. It wasn't just about being Terrell's motivation / the Lady Macbeth in the background. But then in season 3, it did feel like a change of mind almost. Oh, we're going to use her. Oh, wait, nope, never mind. We've got too much stuff going on over here.
Didn't somebody say, and I apologize, I don't know who said it, that even the actor was really surprised by that?
Erin did, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that she didn't see that coming. I mean, I do understand that none of the actors knew what was coming, even when they were doing the table reads for the last season. If you weren't in the episode, you weren't in the room. But I'm wondering if it threw her for such a loop because maybe she signed on for more, or the storyline was different. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know.
I'd love to talk to her one day. We'll have to make it happen.
She's listening to the podcast.
You're listening to our podcast, Stephanie. Tweet at CPU Podcast. That's Sarah's line, and she's not here.
Oh, man.
Oh, man. Anything else you liked or disliked? What about Angela? I hedged into her. Angela is big season 3. What did we think of Angela this season? Because I'm going to have rants about Angela when we get to season 4.
And I'll probably agree with you if they're what I think they are.
I wanted to smack her a lot in this season. I questioned everything she was doing, her motivation behind things. I disagreed with a lot of choices with her character and the way her character developed, culminating in absolutely outright hating her and like, how did you ever believe what she was peddling, kind of thing.
Who was peddling?
White Rose peddling to her later on. That's season 4. But
you're hedging into the rant. Everybody's got the rant. I can feel the tension.
But it's never really adequately explained. Like Angela, the MrRobot question you had in your talking points. How do we find out she knows about MrRobot? She just kind of wakes up and drags Elliot, aka MrRobot, to that meeting.
I have a million. Maybe we should wait till we get to season 4 because I have a million questions about Angela. I think is. I'm just going to say it now. Angela, I think, is the biggest misstep of MrRobot.
I agree.
I do not know, especially where we started and what we were talking about last time. They seemed, the secret that we learned at the very end of the season here is that Philip Price, CEO of E-Corp, is her biological father. So we get paid off there, and we understand now why there's this sort of very affectionate relationship.
His pet project, right. We don't quite know the full implication of that. That comes out in season 4 when we see more interaction between Philip and White Rose. But in season 3, she seems to have this, I don't even know if I can find the word, but cult comes to mind. Manic.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, there's a total shift in Angela after whatever, red room, black room conversation that she had with White Rose. Like, there was a shift that happened, and it was so significant that it changed her behavior. And so for a while I was running along with that, and I was
Yep.
like, okay, I understand. This
Yep.
is why she's doing these things.
Yep.
But
Tell me what's going on. I'm following it.
I'm
Yep.
following.
Yep.
Yep. And then again, like once it gets to season 4 and what happens, I have a lot of questions as well. So yep. I was with it in season 3 with Angela. I could see why she was doing the things that she was doing. I didn't understand why because I didn't know what she saw or learned with White Rose. So, but I could see why she was acting that way.
But back to the question, which I did raise when we were doing our prompts, is it those of you who have been living with all 4 seasons of the show for longer than us, the 3 of us who are talking right now, so Mr. Rewatch folks and Amy, is there ever a point, did we miss it, where Angela explains or something is explained about her becoming aware of the Mr. Robot personality, and or is Angela aware that the Elliot we see, which is the twist, spoiler of the whole show, that the Elliot we see is actually another personality, not the core Elliot?
Well, having watched it through again, I can't find a definitive moment where that discovery is made or that information is learned. She explains how she can tell the difference between Mr. Robot and Elliot, but that doesn't explain how all of a sudden she knows that he's sometimes a different person, as she said. To address the second part of that, does she realize that Elliot is the mastermind? I don't think so. I think she thinks it's either the Elliot she knows or this Mr. Robot other persona, but I don't think she knows about any of the others.
I think you can point at it implicitly through the relationship of Darlene and Angela, because they do have a relationship that exists outside of Elliot, right? So they could have implicitly talked to each other off screen, and that's how she knew. That's how I describe it.
But that's us filling in the blanks.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
But I mean that's possible though.
In the episode.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I was going to say, it's never explicitly explained how Angela knows, but you can imply and infer through the relationships of everybody.
I mean, is it enough to say that the connection that Elliot and Angela have had throughout their childhood, is it enough to say that she would just be able to tell that it was him or not? Because they've been friends all their lives.
I don't know, because that's one of my questions.
Yeah,
I think he places more import on that relationship than she kind of does in the end. That's how I took it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Although I acknowledge she does have much more of a franker and more honest relationship, I think, with Darlene, because Darlene by nature is so frank and honest, and they could have very well had an off-screen conversation, but
That's not satisfactory enough.
it doesn't not for the shift in her character, and the way she just legitimately starts using him. I had an emotional response to that, like, why are you butt?
Did it feel like it was sudden to you? Because it felt sudden to me.
It felt sudden and exploitative, which I think part of that is the loyalty to White Rose, of course. But then it's like, that's one of my questions. How does that newfound worship of White Rose's vision suddenly trump a lifetime of friendship? I don't understand
I
that.
guess, well, that is a bigger question because Angela wasn't the only one that was loyal to White Rose. You know, there were many members of the Dark Army, and there were many that implied that they knew that there was a change, or they knew there was something else there. So, to me, it doesn't seem so far-fetched to think like she could have a shift that fast if what she saw or experienced or whatever it was what we saw Elliot experiencing in season 4. We won't go as far into that, but I think
That Commodore 64 must be really influential.
Who knew?
It's so persuasive.
Right? I mean, I remember Oregon Trail,
Yes.
and I died of dysentery.
We all did. We never made it.
Jeez Louise. Well, we'll hold the Angela part of the conversation, because obviously we're going to drive to a big climax there. Talk about White Rose. We got lots of revelations in season 3 and some in season 4. So talk about, Jeremy, White Rose is your favorite character. This is your launching point.
I'm having trouble in my head deciphering which one's the season 3 and which one's season 4 for the plot points. There are so many that tie together. I loved the interaction with her and her assistant.
Which assistant? Grant or Wu Shen?
Grant.
Okay.
Well, both, but Grant in season 3, which ties into something Irving said in one of the episodes that led me to believe that Irving was a prior lover of White Rose, because he said something to Grant about, I've been where you're at before. I don't remember exactly what it was.
That's the season finale.
Yep.
And I kind of thought, like, oh, Irving, I didn't know you batted for that team. I mean, he did play Vince on Will and Grace.
He did. He did. So you liked Irving. That's a launching point for Dave. Dave, talk to us about Irving.
There you go, Dave. You're welcome for the assist.
His mannerisms and his philosophy on the work he does, and how nonchalantly he just kills Santiago with an axe. There's just so much to love about his character. And he writes a book called Beach Towel.
It's amazing.
Don't forget to bring your towel.
I would read Beach Towel.
Yeah, like, the rewatch team wants to read Beach Towel, so we really want it to be written.
I think I should write Beach Towel.
Yes, do it. They do show a snippet of it, though. I took a picture of the screen because I was curious what they were saying he was writing, and it's somewhere in my photos. But they do. After he meets with Terrell at some point, you see him like hunker down in wherever he lives, wherever he is, and he's just typing away. And part of it, I think, had to do with what he was experiencing around him, the violence and stuff like that. I don't know, I have to go back and read it, but I'm really curious as well.
I would love to read it. I love, too, how he's a used car salesman. He's got all those mugs to, like, be relatable to whoever he's selling to.
Yes.
He's got, like, a #1 dad mug, and, like, it's like some dog breed owner mug. Like, it's awesome. He's just a great character.
He's definitely awesome lets you know that he is the sociopath, that he can put on any face to make himself more attractive to another person, to get more in with them.
I think Bobby Cannavale's performance of him is so brilliant. It's so good, and it's so, like, nuanced. And watching it the second time through, finally when we got to Irving, because he's one of my favorite characters by far. It was just like, oh God, it must have been so much fun to play a character like him.
It's funny because obviously this show is streamable on Prime, and in the episode description for the season premiere of 3, it says, and who the hell is this Irving guy anyway?
Really? I'm gonna have to go look back at that.
I was like, these descriptions are really meta.
Well, it's great because the first scene of season 3 is him ordering at the Red Wheelbarrow, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's like trying to explain. He's like, I should get, like, it's about the principle of it. Like, it's the principle of punch card. You have to accept it.
And he says something about when we lose our principles, we create chaos or something.
Yep.
And I think that scene sets the stage for these whole next 2 seasons, because I think there are a lot of actions people take that they may or may not have considered principled 2 years ago, but that to just, to reach a certain end, they're willing to consider principled now. So this, again, that's back to that blurry line between good and evil, and I think Irving is the perfect stage setter for that.
Well, one thing, all of Irving's actions, like, they definitely stuck with his principles. Like, he definitely steered the ship the way he was going to steer it the entire time. Nothing made him question what he was doing. He definitely knew what he was doing the entire time. And at the end, he stuck with his morals, and he turned out fine. He got a best-selling book, what it looks like. So maybe it's just again.
I don't know. We saw it in an airport bookstore. Best-selling might be reaching. At Logan International in Boston. So,
that's season 4.
That's season 4. Well, we mentioned it already.
Oh.
We've already talked about Beach Towel.
Oh, that's true.
I thought Irving was great. I don't know if I would call him my favorite, but he definitely brought in the comic relief every time he was there in a very dark way.
What I was gonna add to that was, it seems like a lot of the Dark Army fixers are the comic relief.
Yes.
So there's,
the
Janice and
sociopaths
Leon.
are funny. Hashtag.
Leon's so great.
Well, and one thing about watching these figures come on is he did say that when you go away from heroes, it introduces chaos, but he introduces chaos just by being there. You don't know what he's going to do. So every scene with him, I'm just like, is he going to kill somebody? Is there an axe nearby? What's going on?
Is there an axe nearby?
Yeah.
What came at the end?
It's that calm. It's that calm, like, persona, that control.
Because that's what's really kind of scary, is when people are that calm and react in those kind of ways. That's how you
Very
don't know how they're
sober,
going to react.
Yeah.
If I was going to pick a favorite fixer, though, it would be Leon.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
I like Leon.
Leon's another favorite. I have a lot of favorites in this season. I know it's easier for me to say who's not my favorites than my favorites, yeah.
I mean, first of all, I relate to Leon because he's, dissecting TV every time he comes on screen.
Panelist.
Yes. Yeah, Leon should be on this panel.
He should be on. Somebody call Joey Badass. He should totally be on. And then also, he's the one who's sort of, Irving is a diehard loyalist. We know this. And Janice, by function, she's season 4, but by function of her taxidermy and other interests, she fulfills a need by being part of the Dark Army. Leon is he's a freelancer. So he just goes with the flow, and I think he genuinely likes Elliot. And he also there's an interesting energy. So we talked about Trenton and Mobley's End. He's the fixer that finds them and kind of leads them to their destination. So you think things are going to be, maybe they might be okay because it's Leon. And Leon helped Elliot, but then it's not okay because Irving came. So, everybody's nodding. This is a podcast. You have to vocalize affirmation.
So to me, Leon and Price are two sides of the same coin because they're the two I most perceive to be mercenaries. Mm-hmm. Like, these guys are guns for hire. I don't think they care if it's E-Corp, Dark Army, whatever it is, right? And you kind of see that this is getting into season 4 where Leon goes freelance.
He's controlled by the almighty dollar. Yeah.
Right. So I was like, I see them as kind of parallels. And I do love Leon. And Joey Badass is just fun. He's just great.
He is. I love him.
Yeah. He would be good on your panels.
He would be good on the panels. I agree. So I previously mentioned we're dancing around Elliot and Darlene, so we'll have to talk about them before we transition. I've already mentioned that Back to the Future is kind of a huge theme throughout this series. And since we're building off of Mobley and Trenton, there's that interesting departure episode where Elliot basically tries to visit Trenton and Mobley's families to pay his respects because he's starting to see the implications of what he's become involved in. And it's hitting close to home. They've already lost Romero. And he finds, I don't know if he finds so much as Trenton's little brother just kind of latches on to Elliot. So react to this episode because they go to see Back to the Future Part 2, which I think is a very important distinction because this is the Back to the Future where they end up in an alternate reality.
Yes.
Alternate 1985. So talk about Back to the Future. What do you think? Was there a larger implication here? Was it an Easter egg? Is this just favorite flicks of Sam's being peppered in? I mean, I totally agree. Back to the Future, 2 thumbs up.
It's not a coincidence.
When we talked about seasons 1 and 2, we were talking about, things being referential, and I think for me, this was the season where I was starting to question if this was going to be a story about time travel. So I thought that maybe this was leading to that. And it almost became so obvious, again, it was a misdirection. It was a total misdirection, for me anyway, as a viewer. I thought, okay, now I see what this is really about. Which I should have learned by now. No, this is not what this is really about. You do not trust what they give you. You just have to go along with it. But for me, everything alluding up to that episode, I was like, okay, we're in time travel now. Nope. No, we were not. That's okay. That's okay, but yeah, that's kind of where I was heading with. And then this particular episode, I can't say it was my favorite, but I think it was just because it was a little bit of a change of pace again, so it slows things down a little bit. But I also, now knowing what we know about Elliot, am wondering if Elliot was seeing a little bit of himself in Trenton's younger brother, and
whose name is Mohammed, by the way.
So it gave a little bit more of an emotional impact.
I have mixed feelings about. I mean, I love that episode. I enjoy it, but it felt to me that we were seeing a very sobering. I was having a very sobering experience watching Elliot struggle, but then interact with Trenton's little brother and how emotional that was. And I do think that there's a little piece of seeing himself in this little boy, the way that, introducing him to Back to the Future. And being distracted from killing himself and going back to those homes and demanding, from Mobley's brother that he get a good funeral and things. It was just, I think it was, for me, it felt like a new layer of Elliot and who, seeing his vulnerable side and seeing him like struggle with the weight of all of the consequences and everything that has resulted thus far with the hack and with the things going on around them. So it was, for me, I took it as just another layer of Elliot's struggle and how he came out of that episode.
Yeah, I agree. I think the episode with Trent's little brother is all about the consequence of the actions that he's been making, right? Because if it wasn't for him in F Society, Trent would still probably be alive. And so he has to deal face to face with one of the consequences of his actions.
Yeah, I agree with that. Everybody must also, too, because they've gone quiet. Well, let's talk about Elliot. Elliot's got quite the journey this season, and then it ramps up in the next season. But this season, it's really about, he's trying to undo 5-9. That's his whole purpose for being. He's trying to counteract the Dark Army and E-Corp by undoing 5-9. And there is always 2 steps back for each step forward, and he's also wrestling with Mr. Robot. He accepts Mr. Robot and understands what Mr. Robot is, but still struggles with Mr. Robot. They kind of have a partnership there that is sometimes fraught. And then in the meantime, Darlene is struggling with Elliot because he's struggling with Mr. Robot, and they're also trying to work together to undo the hack. So let's talk about all of that. What did you think? And we probably should also dovetail Dominique in here because some developments happened for her as well. What did you think? Was that too big of a question?
It was kind of like, where do we start?
Where do we begin?
Okay.
Do you want to start on this one?
Well, no. I react better and see questions best. So, Darlene is being used as a mole, kind of a plant, by Dom to try to track Elliot. And that actually creates a bit of a dynamic between the two women. Talk about that. How's that work for you?
I knew from the get-go they were going to end up a thing.
You did?
I did. I called it right away because she's the loner. She lives at home. She talks to Alexa, and that's it.
That is very sad.
I don't know. She just had this lesbian vibe, I guess. And Darlene has always been that kind of girl, like, hey, whatever floats your boat, man. I can get down with that.
You're good at predicting things, though.
So I called the Dom. I was like, there's something about, it's in the moment. I actually think that Dom's going to get together with White Rose in, I guess, the second season.
Yeah.
That's my prediction. But there's something about her portrayal of that character where you know that's a queer character and that somehow that's going to be introduced into the storyline. I don't see that relationship is real red flaggy for me, even though I love the storyline and we'll talk about it in the 4th season too, that episode. But I think it's just I think they're trying to do an opposites attract thing. And so just the tension of it is really interesting. But I wonder, when you see Dom kind of hesitating because Darlene is her source, do you expect that Dom's going to kind of violate a rule and get together with Darlene?
I didn't expect that.
I did not at all.
I thought she was very much by the book rule follower, and she tries to keep that vibe going for the rest of the series. Not always successfully, but she certainly stands by that position.
And I wonder, because I struggled with the leap between, not the leap, but how quickly their relationship, if you will, advanced. Because at first I kind of thought, oh, she's being used, which she was. But I actually didn't expect it to develop further than that. Saying that said, I am glad it did. I do like that, their dynamic. But I feel like that's what you said about what's being said about Dom being very like by the book and has to, this is the law. This is the protocol. It speaks to how lonely she is, for me anyway. For her to succumb to Darlene's advances and suggestions and flirtation. I just think it speaks to how lonely she is.
I totally agree with that. That's what I was going to say, is like a lot of these characters, a similar theme that they carry is their loneliness, and their loneliness propels a lot of what their actions are, even if it goes against the rules that they've set for themselves. And Dom is so that character that's by the book and follows the rules, and that you wouldn't you wouldn't expect her to go outside of that, but you see her extreme loneliness. If we didn't see that, you know, it would be hard to understand, I think, why she crossed that line, but because they lay that out really well. And I think it's like a good dynamic against Elliot's loneliness too. You start to understand why she would have crossed that line.
We do see her struggle too.
We do.
Yeah.
That's actually a great observation, and you've put words to it, and I probably unconsciously or subconsciously registered that is the common theme of all of the characters. Mm-hmm. Literally every character.
Which is funny because, you know, Elliot is so not alone.
I know, he's not.
He's so crowded. There's so many people around him.
Yeah.
There's so many.
Inside and outside of his mind.
Yes.
That's yeah. I have nothing else to say. Everybody got quiet again. Well, I think everybody's excited to talk about season 4. Is there anything we missed from season 3?
The bombings.
The cyber bombing. So let's talk about the season finale. Yeah, that happens. So not only are there cyber bombings because the Dark Army essentially pulls the trigger, if you will, and this phase 2 thing is redirected towards multiple E-Corp facilities as opposed to just
71.
71 E-Corp facilities rather than just one. In the meantime, we've already referred to the axe scene. Santiago has outed himself as a double agent. Dominique, Darlene, and Elliot are all dragged to that remote barn where Tyrell was hiding out, that farm, that country house, whatever it is, in the barn where they were, there. And then they're going to be killed, except that Elliot talks through Grant to try to convince White Rose that she still needs him for this paper shipping, I don't know how to describe it, the paper facility, to restore the records. So while that's happening then, the Dark Army initiates these cyber bombings, and Angela also has a bit of a break. I don't want to call it a psychotic break. Maybe a delusional break.
Now I feel like I'm confusing. I thought the cyber bombings were in the mid-season. Was that the mid-season?
No, that was
season 3.
Season 3, yeah.
Yeah. The one where all of the buildings were blown?
It's the one where Elliot's running down the stairs and MrRobot keeps taking over and they keep skipping.
Yeah, that's all of that kind of ends, all of that is basically in the last couple of episodes of season 3.
By 4 they're working together.
Yeah. Do you remember when he's walking and MrRobot's slamming him against the wall and the shelves and the floor?
Yes.
That's the same episode as the buildings
maybe I
blowing
was
up.
further along than I thought I was.
Because it melts, it goes...
Yeah, when I was watching the show initially, I watched up until that episode, that episode where Angela, they're in the E-Corp building, and it's...
Oh, the rioters are you talking about?
Yeah, all the rioters.
That's separate. That's before.
That happened at the beginning-ish of season 3,
That's more mid-season. That one is middle season.
Was it not at the end of that episode that Elliot sees on the news the 71 bombings? Because then Angela goes into her little psychosis of rewatching.
Yeah, I think she's right actually, because she starts rewatching the news and making the buildings go back up.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's still season 3.
Or was that in a flashback?
Still season
4. That's all I was saying.
Yep,
it wasn't okay.
That was not a flashback. When the buildings are going back, she's watching the tape and rewinding the tape.
Yeah.
Or whatever, digital, DVR, tape, whatever. We've advanced as a society. It's fine. Technology. I'm dating myself.
That's when she really starts to spiral. That's when Angela's character really starts to spiral because she helped cause this.
Yes.
And so then she gets into that psychosis where, she's watching it back and forth. But it was right at the end of that episode that Elliot is watching the news and that realization comes over him of what actually happened. That episode in particular is one of my favorites in the series because it's almost all in one take. That whole riot. It's hard to even notice, but as you're watching the episode, you're like, this is so fluid. And the transitions between him talking to Darlene outside of the E-Corp building and her telling him that, she's been working with the FBI, and then it transitions to Angela back up in the building again. It's very seamless, but at the end of that episode is when you see Elliot's face and then you see the news of what's happened. And I think that was the mid-season. because then after
I
that-
didn't break it out by episode number.
Oh, it's so fine. It's so fine. But I was trying to think about, like, because, like, Angela, you know, she's manipulative throughout the beginning of the season, but then she really has a change, and that's what it was she kind of started to feel that guilt, I think.
No,
about
yeah,
what she
you're
had
agreed.
done.
Agreed.
I think that I felt like her change was when she was Elliot confronted her, and she said, no, I've seen it. This can undo everything. And then she turns away from him and says, I don't think you're not supposed to be here, Mr. Alderson, or something, like, you've been fired. Like, I think, for me, that was the point in which she started her real meltdown, her real breakdown. That was for me, anyway. Do you know what moment I'm talking about?
I do. I'm still... Just, can someone clarify, are you looking? Is the cyber bombings and the riot in the same episode?
Okay, so the riot is in the middle of season 3.
Correct.
Middle, like.
Yes.
The cyber bombings, it looks like, are actually towards the end of the middle.
That's what I thought. Because the third season's 10 episodes, so you basically, I don't know if this is 6 or 7 that the riot happens.
I think it was earlier than that, actually.
You think so? Golly gee.
The numbering's off 1, 2, right? So it gets confusing about which episode is which.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's looking
I'm
on
so
the internet.
sorry.
I know.
But I was like, I was pretty
That's
sure.
how intricate the show is.
I
We're
know.
like, where are we in the story in this season?
All right.
The bombing happens in episode 6.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
When does the riot happen?
Oh, yeah, okay, that's
Finding that out.
5, I think. Because I think the riot's the prelude to it.
Aaron, you're correct. The protesters break into E-Corp, terrifying the workers. Irving calls Angela. The riot's a distraction. And the 71 E-Corp facilities are 6. Wow, you're right. So it's not the same episode.
I
but
still
it's called
wonder what's in the bag that Hamburger Man gives to Angela at the end of the riot. And that's going to haunt me.
There's so many things that are going to haunt me, too.
I just thought
That's
it
a good
was an
point.
extra hamburger. Or maybe the
I
French
wasn't
fries.
even thinking about that until you said it. Now I'm like, dang it.
You got to watch her face and how she reacts. It's something very ominous in that hamburger bag.
That is a good point. I also want to share, I found this out because I use a variety of sources from my, predominantly Wikipedia for giving you your plot points, just because. So I don't know if you noticed, but the first season episode titles, this is what Wikipedia says, have a suffix corresponding to a type of video file format. Episode 2 is a type of encryption for each episode. Episode 3 is in the form of a computer command, including, like, one of them is called shutdown, -R. And then the last season is HTTP status codes. That's how intricate this show is. Mm-hmm. They actually named things after computer things. Don't slam the table with a microphone on. So you wanted to talk about the cyber bombings? Now that we figured out where this is. Back to track.
I was just confused because we were talking about the finale.
Yes.
And I thought it was prior to. And it
And
was
you're correct.
prior to. So
My bad. I'm
sorry.
sorry.
No, I apologize for derailing that.
It's fine.
I question a lot of what I see during this show.
I question my sanity.
Yeah. So it could happen at any moment. But I remember that episode because of the way that it was shot. All one take. And that has been a central theme for me throughout the show. It's just the technical aspect of it. It's just impeccable.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Oh, it's brilliant. Mm-hmm. So beautifully done.
Well, what about the season finale then? Which is the barn and the axe.
Yes.
That much is true.
So maybe even to segue between the seasons, I'll say, the post-credits scene.
Yes.
I changed my mind about this later, but when Vera is reintroduced, I was very unexcited about
too.
that.
Same.
I was like, why is he back?
I'm with you. I was like, are you kidding me right now? Yeah. At first.
And why? And, well, I guess that segues into season 4. So we'll leave it there. Is there anything else you want to say about season 3 that we haven't said before we transition?
Did we talk about, was it Grant that killed himself?
Mm-hmm. It was Grant. Because White Rose told him he was unnecessary.
I don't know. I guess I kept drawing parallels between Grant and Irving the whole time because I thought they were similar statuses at one point or another. So I was like, oh, Grant killed himself because of White Rose. Maybe Irving found out something about White Rose that made him not that fanatical anymore. I don't know. It was just things I was throwing around in my head at the time.
Well, he also told Dom that his time was done. Irving did, out in the yard or wherever they're chopping the wood and using the axe on Santiago. Almost as if...
He was forced.
or released, because the thing this show seeds, and this is going to become very important in a second when we talk about Angela, is that White Rose has this tremendous power of persuasion over the people that follow her in her mission, whatever that mission is, her grand vision. And it seems as though Irving did that loyally and then reached some sort of predetermined endpoint and was just like, my job is done. I've done what I came here to do and I'm done. Whereas Grant was pushing back in almost a disobedient or insubordinate way, and then White Rose discarded him because he was no longer as loyal as he had appeared to be in the past. Whereas Irving was still loyal, he had fulfilled everything he was supposed to do. Does that make sense?
Almost like he was, I think he was loyal, I just don't think he was fall in line and toe the bill kind of loyal. Like, everyone else follows her instructions to a T, where he was more willing to give it back to her. And
Grant was, or Irving?
Grant.
Okay.
No, Irving did everything to a T.
Okay.
I don't know, I just thought it was a very interesting dynamic between those two, in particular, during that episode.
I didn't really think about it too much.
Yeah,
That's
I didn't
interesting.
care about Grant too much.
Neither.
I mean, I think...
Not as far as Dark Army people, no.
I think he was a boy toy / assistant who did what she's asked of him.
Well, see, that would make a little bit more sense considering he did his time with White Rose, Irving that is, as the boy toy. She moved on to younger guys because she could never probably connect with anybody as well as she did, which we find out in the next season. I don't remember his name, but her former lover.
I don't remember his name either, but yeah.
We'll figure it out. Everybody's itching to talk about season 4. I can feel the tension in the air.
It was hard to talk about 3 without talking about 4.
Totally.
Your friendly neighborhood Chief Couch Potato Kylie here, interrupting our regularly scheduled programming for an unusual interlude. Don't worry, we're not switching to commercial. I have both a confession and a fun fact to share with you, gentle listener. The MrRobot Seasons 3 and 4 discussion, as this segment of the conversation was originally intended to be, and which our panel recorded in March 2020, right around the time of the declaration of the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic, proved to be the longest individual recording session that Couch Potatoes Unite! Ever clocked in the history of our podcast, which is about 5 years old and covers many shows. This means, friends, that our panelists engaged in such a passionate, involved discussion about MrRobot, particularly about Season 4 and the series ending events, the episode being released next week will cover these things, that this singular recording ended up being about 4 hours long once finished. Since we try not to push past the 2-hour limit for any given episode, though we admittedly have had some lengthy episodes in the past with equally involved but different chats, I thought it best to break up this talk into 2 separate episodes in lieu of the nature of the series we're analyzing. In this way, Season 4 and the series finale are given an exclusive focused segment, which I think is appropriate for the show in question. After all, MrRobot raised potentially more questions than for which it offered answers, and our panel's Season 4 review only serves to bolster the fact that MrRobot was a unique show with a unique subject and presentation that dazzled our panelists' minds even as it frustrated their TV-watching hearts. To that end, you won't want to miss next week's conclusion to our 3-part retrospective dissecting the gritty and surreal MrRobot. Until that time, though, it's time for the credits. Couch Potatoes Unite! Was produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato, which is really another way of saying executively produced by me, Kylie Piette. My associate producers are Krista Pennington and Selene Rezmer. I edit this podcast, and our logo is by Rebecca Wallace. Our marketing graphic artist is Krista. Our theme song was written by Sarah Milbratz and sung by Sarah, Amy McDaniel, and Kelsey Rezmer. Kelsey played the keyboard, Ian McDonough played the bass, Christian Somerville played the guitar, and the whole kit and caboodle was engineered and produced by Kyle Aspinall and Christian. We hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, take the time to rate us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts. Give us stars, give us comments, give us reviews. Let us know how we're doing. Send us a message. We might just read it on the podcast. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, what we should keep, what we should toss. You know how it goes. And if you have suggestions on shows we might consider, contact us at our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, where we have a guest book, by email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast cpupodcast@gmail.com or via our social media, Facebook, Twitter at CPU Podcast, and Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite. Though, of course, we add new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time. We always have several more new episodes coming down the pike. Just listen to our intros. And if you miss old episodes or want to know in general what we cover, just find us. We are everywhere and searchable wherever you look for things on the internet. You can search for us, or you can subscribe at our website, our channels, our social media accounts. Stay up on our new events and episodes. Until the next time, the first 3 seasons of MrRobot are currently available to stream on Amazon Prime. Season 4 remains in the status of coming soon to an Amazon outlet near us, though it is available for purchase now. The 4th season can also be accessed via USA's website or app with subscription. If you have nominations for shows we should cover on our podcast, contact us via social media or email. You can volunteer to be a panelist too. In the meantime, and until next time, until next episode, new episodes are published every Wednesday. Keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned! Bye-bye!